I made my son empty his pockets at a police station while a detective counted my late husband's coins under fluorescent lights. By sundown, the prosecutor gave him two choices: sell the truck, sell the watch, sell the shiny things he hid his panic inside, and drive with his 69-year-old mother to every pawnshop in the state to buy back what he had already sold, or spend the night in a cell and let a judge decide the rest. He chose me, the map, and 2 months of receipts. If you want the sweet part first, the 1916 D Mercury dime came home in week 5. I slid it into its blue circle and the folder made a sound like relief. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Stories that end with a click usually begin with a door that someone shouldn't have opened. The door was my hall closet. The someone was my son. My name is Agnes May Crowley. I am a widow, a grandmother, and on the morning this began, a woman standing in a kitchen with a kettle that did not yet know it would scream. My husband, Ray, taught history to 7th graders for 30 years and collected coins for longer than that. He called them stories made of silver. He liked the way a date could be a trapdoor to a whole year. He liked the way a thumbprint on a slabbed case could be a fossil of a moment. We didn't have a dragon's hoard. We had Whitman blue folders sprouting like sky in a safe, a few slabbed beauties that arrived late in life when the mortgage finally left home, and rolls of coins with masking tape labels in Ray's careful block letters. The collection was never an investment in the way men with ties like to say it. It was a trust. It belonged to our grandchildren, Liam and June, who have not yet learned how to be bored by history. It lived in a heavy safe in our hall closet. The combination lived in my head and in a scrap of paper taped behind a square of green felt in an old picture frame, where Ray wrote, "For emergencies and grand adventures." He died 3 years ago, and I have been careful with that sentence every day since. My son, Caleb, came by early on a Tuesday with a smile that looked like a receipt. "Need your ladder," he said through the screen, gutters. Grown sons do not appear before 9 unless something inside them is louder than sleep. He wandered down the hall while I set the kettle on and called good morning to the closet door as if he could charm a safe. "Ma," he said, too casual, "you still have Dad's stamp book?" "We never collected stamps," I said. "Right," he said. "Coins." It is a small talent to hear the word that changes the air. Coins. The kettle began to speak. I switched it off before it screamed. When I reached the hall, Caleb had the closet light on and the safe dragged forward just enough to dust the carpet in plaster. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Helping," he said. "Sloan wants to make room at our place if you ever—" He let the ever dangle, as if I would move in because he rearranged a shelf. "The combination, Ma," he added. "I should have it, just in case." "No," I said. "You shouldn't." He tried the dial anyway. Ray's birthday. Our anniversary. Liam's birth year. He turned the wheel the way a boy turns a story to see if it has an easier side. When he looked up, he wore the smile that used to buy him a cookie he hadn't earned. "Curiosity," he said. "Curiosity is a kitten. Debt is a dog with a rope in its mouth." I stepped past him and spun the dial to November 23rd, 57 to November 23rd, 1957. The date Ray bought his first coin at a flea market and came home with the giddy shame of having spent $5 on a silver story. The bolts withdrew. The heavy doors swung open. Blue. So much blue. Blue the color of plain daylight, blue the color of a promise. Whitman folders. Plastic boxes. Coin tubes with tape that read wheat since 1909 to 1958, Buffalo nickels, Walkers, Barbers, Mercury dimes. A slab here and there like a picture frame around a face. Caleb looked like a man staring at an unlocked past. The wanting in his eyes made me cold. "You know where these go," I said. 2 folders each for Liam and June. Slabbed pieces in trust until they're 25. The stories first, the sums second. "They're kids," he said. "They want scooters and screen time. They want to learn the right names for luck," I said. He tested a sentence with his jaw. "I'm in a corner," he said. "What corner?" "Truck loan. Some business friction. Nothing you need to worry about," he said, which is how a person invites you to do nothing while asking for everything. "Temporary. I take a few, sell a few, then I'll build it back. You'll never even." "Stop," I said. "Which part of your father's life are you borrowing?" The 1909 SVB, the one he traded for across 3 shows and 1 rainy conversation. The 1932 D quarter he called his stubborn little prince. The 1916 D Mercury dime he found with shaky hands and paid for with a thick envelope and a thin smile. I closed the safe. I spun the dial. The metal hummed like the inside of a bell. He took a step toward me that was not gentle. Not violent, either, but full of the pressure of a man who thinks momentum is morality. He stopped when he saw my hand was already on the phone. I did not call a counselor. I did not call a neighbor. I called the non-emergency police line I had saved after the house down the block got its front door kicked in last Christmas. The woman on the other end asked for my name. I gave it. Nature of your call, she asked. My son is trying to steal from me, I said. The property is a family inheritance. He looked at me as if I had switched our places in the family photo. In a way, I had. I had finally stepped into the part of motherhood that comes with a key ring and a straight back. He whispered, "Ma," and I wished that word was enough to rewind the room. It wasn't. Detective Alvarez came with Officer Brill. Alvarez had the calm of a man who has had to call his own mother to tell her something she did not want to hear. He listened, he photographed, he wrote. He asked me if any coins were already missing. Yes, I said, and he blinked. The safe was shut, and he is a man who likes evidence. The theft started weeks ago, I said. With his plans. With the way he tried the wrong dates and hoped one would work. Alvarez nodded. He understood that theft isn't only the moment a hand lifts a thing, it's also the long plan that empties it in advance. We went to the station. The air there is made of coffee and consequence. The assistant district attorney on duty was Miss Parker, a woman whose pen clicks the way a gavel sounds in a minor key. She explained the path in front of us, a proper theft charge and a courtroom, or, if the victim consented, a structured pretrial diversion with restitution, real, heavy restitution, and a timeline. She looked at me when she said victim, then at my son when she said timeline, and back at me when she said consent. Inventory first, she said. Every piece documented. Photographs, holes, labels. Second, immediate liquidation of his non-essential assets toward replacement. Third, active recovery. He will go to each shop that received the coins he sold. He will pay the buyback price or ask for assistance. He will bring proof every week for 2 months. If, at the end, you are substantially made whole, and I mean documented attempts on the remainder, we dismiss without a conviction. If not, we proceed. I looked at Caleb. He stared at a spot on the wall where a bulletin board had once hung. For a sliver of time he was 12 again, cheeks full of summer and promises. But we were not in a yard with a hose, and this could not be fixed with a chore. I will help with the inventory, I said. And I will go with him. I will hold the money, he will hold the doors. Miss Parker nodded. And you will call me every Friday by 5, she said to Caleb. You will not bluff. You will not minimize. You will not disappear between storefronts. If you cannot afford your word, you cannot afford diversion. He signed a paper that made his next 60 days into a roadmap. I signed one that put my name beside the word victim and beside the phrase substantial recovery. I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a locksmith. We began with a safe. Alvarez wore gloves and the same face people wear at gravesides when they are also trying to remember what casserole to bring. I lifted the Whitman folders and called out what was there and, more importantly, what wasn't. Walker's Good through 44. Morgan dollars with a bright gap at 1893, S. Buffalo nickels with the proud bison standing in a herd of blue circles. Wheat cents rose like a calendar of brown suns. The slabbed pieces were logged one by number, including the 1932 D quarter in its scratched coffin, the 1901 oh that never learned modesty, and the 1916 D that was not there. 3 weeks ago, Caleb said, voice low. I sold that one 3 weeks ago. To whom? He listed the store names. Ace Pawn, Quick Cash, Delaney Gold and Loan. He had every receipt. Men who sprint through bad ideas keep their paperwork because it proves the road was real. He had also moved 6 silver dollars, 3 barber halves, 2 rolls of mercury dimes he called spares, and a handful of quarters with dates that sounded like our family tree. Truck, Miss Parker said. making a tidy list. Watch. Grill. Pizza oven. Those will be gone by the end of the week. He nodded. It is humbling to sell a shiny thing you bought to distract yourself from the dull stare of your own numbers. I went home that night with an inventory clipped to a cutting board the way Ray used to clip recipes. I slept with the folder on the nightstand like a Valentine that bites. Day 1 of recovery began with a sale in our own driveway. The neighbor who borrows cups of sugar bought the outdoor pizza oven and a few accessories with the look of a man making peace with his appetite. Caleb shook his hand like a truce. We met the jeweler at 9. I sold the watch myself. It felt appropriate for the time to leave at my insistence. Greer, the jeweler, turned the face in the light and said, "This one never learned to be quiet." She paid a fair price and offered a sentence I tucked away for later. Sons sometimes mistake their mother's kindness for permission. We drove to Ace Pawn. Pawnbrokers have a way of looking at you as if they are reading footnotes you did not know you had. The man behind the counter called me ma'am and called Caleb back again. He pulled up the transaction records, and together we followed our coins out of his shop and into other hands. The 1916, D, he said. That one moved fast. 2 days. Private buyer through Delaney. Call him Z. He rolled his eyes as if he'd been arguing with the letter ever since. Where do we find Z? I asked. He finds people, the pawnbroker said. He finds what they think they can't keep. He dialed a couple of numbers and scribbled a list of addresses that looked like someone else's bad days. He sold us back a barber half he still had on hand at a price that made both of us wince and both of us nod. We thanked him like you thank a bridge for not collapsing while you cross. Quick Cash had brighter lights and colder air. The manager there was brisk but not unkind. We can't unring a bell, she said, but sometimes we can hear the echo. She sold us back $2 Morgan and a handful of quarters with a discount she did not call a discount. Call it a community fee, she said. We charge it in reverse on Tuesdays. By noon my envelope had dieted from thick to responsible. We ate sandwiches on the hood of the sedan Caleb had borrowed from Sloane's sister after he listed the pearl-white truck online with an honest description and an embarrassed price. A teenager in a ball cap yelled something about old money from the sidewalk that sounded like an insult, but landed like a hymn. I looked at Caleb's hands. They were the same hands that had once delivered dandelions in a fist and declared flowers free. We drove to Delaney Gold and Loan. The front windows had bars thick as conclusions. The sign shouted by gold because someone once decided shouting at metal makes it more obedient. The man behind the counter recognized Caleb the way a person recognizes a predictable mistake. He told us again that the dime had gone to a private buyer and again that the buyer liked his privacy loud. What did he look like? I asked. Did his patience jingle when he walked? Did he smell like aftershave or gasoline? Did he try to charm the fluorescent lights? The man smirked. Tall. Hat. The kind you wear because you think the brim is a personality. He slid a card across the counter. He's not hard to find. He posts on coin forums under Zero Regrets Z. Likes to show off. Likes to say widow like it's a coupon. We did not have to search far. Liam's friend, 13, blessed with a search engine instinct I will never own, found the post. A photograph of my dime beside a watch whose price might pay for a year of groceries. Score of the month, Z wrote. Widow didn't know what she had. I printed the page on our old inkjet and carried it like a summons. Miss Parker carried it to a judge who had a practical posture. The order she brought back tasted like a new word I didn't know I could pronounce, surrender. Detective Alvarez rode with us through a gate that opened because names matter even to iron. He turned out to be a Zachary with cheekbones and an indoor hat. He greeted us with a monologue about market value until Alvarez handed him the paper that made his mouth learn a new shape. He produced the coin in its slab and tried on a shrug. I paid fair, he said. You paid a thief, I said. Return is fairer. He placed the dime in my palm. I felt it through the plastic. It was like hearing the echo of a song you used to dance to in a kitchen where someone else stands now. I put the coin in my pocket, where Ray once kept a wheat cent as a joke on luck. We went home and slid it into the space where its absence had made a hole that whistled. The click when it seated was small and magnificent. June asked if coins sleep when they're back where they belong. I told her yes, sometimes metal can finally close its eyes. The The weeks became a rout. Pawnshops have their own weather. The good ones feel like basements where someone has lined up their past neatly and hopes someone will see the pattern. The bad ones feel like waiting rooms for people who ran, then ran out. We saw both, with coffee that tasted like time. In Durant, a shop called Rusty's was run by a woman with penny-colored hair who said she never expected to be on the helpful side of a story like ours. She produced a 1932 decorder from a drawer and scolded Caleb softly as if he were a nephew who'd borrowed a lawnmower and returned it low on gas. "You can pawn your pride," she told him. "You just can't afford the interest." In Highland, a man named Mike brought out a roll labeled Merc-D, 1930s in someone else's hand. Inside, 9 dimes like tiny moons. A guy came in with a backpack and a script, Mike said. He sold small, fast, and looked surprised every time I said yes. 3 of the dimes filled holes. 6 did not, but they were kin to ours, and I bought them anyway because Ray would have kept them for trade. A shop called Gable and Sons felt like a sermon. The elder son lectured us on the ethics of the secondary market while his younger brother quietly packed 2 walkers in tissue and wrote a number on a slip that undercut the lecture nicely. We left with both the coins and a reminder that righteousness is a loud coat some people wear over arithmetic. Every Friday, 5 o'clock, we parked with the hazard lights blinking in front of the courthouse annex and carried in our receipts like report cards. Miss Parker listened. Alvarez circled dates. Documented attempt, she'd ask, pen poised. We learned to bring photographs of storefronts, names of clerks, descriptions of bracelets and wristwatches, and the color of the cat in the window because attempts are stronger when they can smell their own details. The road did its own teaching. You learn the economy of apologies when you have to make them sequentially. "I'm sorry" became less like a charm and more like a ledger entry. Caleb sold the grill to the neighbor with brown sugar ethics. He sold the truck after 3 lowball offers and 1 buyer who arrived with a mechanic and a prayer. He listed tools he had named and shoes he had barely walked in. He traded shine for solvency, and the house hummed differently. Sloane began to sleep. The children began to ask better questions. In week 3, a man named Hector called Alvarez. He ran a coin kiosk in a mall where teenagers bend time into loops. He had bought 2 barbers and a Morgan from a client who'd used Caleb as a verb. The coins were still in his safe. He sold them back to us at cost, plus the tiniest fee that he said was for the lesson, and I paid it gladly. In week 4, I found 3 wheat cents at a yard sale held by a woman named Letty who sold regrets in sandwich bags. They were not our exact years, but I taped a no card inside the wheat folder anyway. Letty, June's son, roses that needed water. Liam decided we should track every buyback with a story card, and we did date, place, price, and the sentence we would want to remember if our future selves asked how we learned anything at all. Between shops, we talked. That might be the hardest part to tell. Not the phone calls, not the receipts, not the embarrassing questions to indifferent men in bright rooms, but the slow practice of speaking honestly without turning confession into a performance. I told him the truth about the day Ray died, which is that the house sounded wrong and the clock got louder and no coin felt like a story, only like a circle trying to console me with its own shape. He told me the truth about the night he decided to take the dime out of the safe, which is that he thought if he acted quickly, he could outrun the part of himself that knows better. "People don't get paid to outrun themselves," I said. "They get tired." "I thought I was protecting you from worry," he said. "You took my worry for a drive and brought it back with friends," I said. "I deserve worse," he said. "You deserve the work," I said. "That's already worse than a speech." He laughed then, a small sound he didn't try to turn into anything else. He asked to come over on Sunday to cook, not to borrow. He arrived with ingredients and the knowledge that a cutting board is not a stage. In week 5, we brought the dime home. The children watched me open the Whitman folder as if I were lifting the lid on a box that might breathe. The click it made when it went in place belongs to the family now. We say, make it click, when we mean do it properly all the way to the gentle end. June tried the phrase at dinner over a math problem and looked proud when her father clapped. Week 6 taught me that not all losses return in coin form. Some return as conversations you weren't brave enough to attempt before. I took coffee to Sloane and apologized for the sentence I said in our kitchen the day the officers came, about her cheerfulness being a blanket too thin for stitches. You were right, she said, which I did not expect and did not enjoy. But we both learned why I thought the blanket was enough. We started driving together once a week. She watched the way I kept the money wrapped in an envelope inside my purse and wrote down the prices as if she were auditing the world. She said the inventory looked like a poem if you squinted. I told her Ray used to squint at coins not because he couldn't see but because he wanted the coins to know he was thinking. The Dieters had their own moral map. We stopped at a diner in Fairview where the waitress wore a name tag that said "Dot," and the pie case made both of us more forgiving. We stopped at a park where a bronze bison stood beside a bronze boy, and June asked if the boy was listening for a story or for footsteps. The smallness of good things is powerful when you are spending your days reversing the large. The worst shop was a tidy place run by a man in a soft sweater who had the smile of a person who has practiced remorse in the mirror. He had bought a Morgan dollar from Caleb and sold it 2 hours later to a man who sometimes flipped houses and sometimes flipped coins. Higher margins on the coins, he said in an apologetic voice that felt like a rug with a trick in it. Lower risk. Not lower, I said. Just more portable. He gave us nothing back. He sold us nothing. He did, however, tell us the city where the house flipper lived, and we wrote it down as a documented attempt. We learned to speak Pawnshop. Hold back means a clerk liked the piece enough to keep it near her desk a while so she could talk herself into it after payday. Quick turn means someone will enjoy the coins the way a seagull enjoys a sandwich, loudly, briefly, publicly. Quiet collector means a person who buys with cash and keeps his joy at home like a hobby his neighbors will never name. Alvarez kept calling. Some weeks he had something. Most weeks he had encouragement disguised as dry humor. Progress looks like paper, he said. You're doing the boring hero work. He met us for coffee once and asked about the 1893 we had never had. I just like saying that number, he confessed. It feels like a secret handshake. Miss Parker remained a metronome. 5 o'clock, she would say on Thursday when she answered my call the day early because I was learning to stop making a habit of just in time. Tell me what changed. We told her everything. The 2 barbers recovered from the kiosk, the ledger entry we titled Letty's Roses, the day we learned that a parking lot can be a classroom if you let yourself learn in public. She marked it all. In week 7, she asked a new question. And the counseling? Caleb nodded toward the paper he kept folded like a pocket flag. He had started meeting with a man named Russell at a community clinic where the waiting room had fish in a tank that looked disappointed and hopeful at once. Russell was not a magician, which is why Caleb liked him. They talked about momentum and shame and the way purchases disguise fear. They talked about learning new verbs. Caleb started saying maintain instead of fix, plan instead of hope, save instead of stash. In week 7, we found a box of oddities at a thrift store benefiting a shelter. Inside, for halves, 2 quarters, a smile from the clerk when I explained our scavenger hunt. She gave us a 20% discount because her manager liked stories that end well. I said we were working on it. That same week, a man named Anders called because he had read the forum thread where Z had posted and where dozens of strangers had turned his comments into a small courtroom. He had bought a 1901 from Z for a friend's 40th birthday. The friend doesn't care about the grade, he said. He cares about the smile at the party. Anders sold it back to us at cost because he liked the idea of the smile happening alongside a story about doing the right thing. I wrote Anders a thank you note on stationery I keep for funerals and weddings. It felt correct to put this somewhere in between. We met suspicion, too. People asked if we were running a scam, buying low, crying, selling high. I learned to carry the police report number on an index card. I learned to say Detective Alvarez's name as if it were a password. I learned to let people see my steadfastness, because it spends like currency in rooms where cash is king. Not every attempt was noble. In week 8, a man tried to sell us back our own walkers with a story about how he found them in his grandmother's bread tin. He did not know I had written Tiny Nick over Tea and Trust in the inventory because Ray had once pointed it out with the tender triumph men reserved for the small scars that prove affection. I told him we'd take the coins for the price he had paid and no more. He left angry. I wrote down the plate number. Alvarez called him 2 days later. Nobody enjoyed that phone call. Around then our kitchen learned a new sound, quiet laughter. Sloane corrected me on a recipe and then corrected herself and then asked if I minded being corrected. It felt like a magic trick every time someone chose a question over a certainty. Liam started quizzing us on dates. Name 3 reasons 1932 matters, he'd say, and we'd answer with our quarter, the Depression, and the way our family had invented the term stubborn little prince. June drew pictures of coins with eyes. They see, she said. They don't blink until they're home. The farther we drove, the closer we got to the middle of the story, where shame turns into work and work starts sounding like hope. We made peace with the idea that we would not get everything back. Some losses do not return to their original shape. We would be substantially made whole, Miss Parker's careful phrase, and the remainder we would honor by writing down the pursuit. I taped a copy of the court order inside the safe like a guardian and left just enough blank space beside it for future lessons. The last 2 weeks were made of small finalities. We circled back to places where prices had been stubborn and found that time softens more than bread. A clerk who had refused to sell us a 1901 S because her boyfriend wanted it sold it to us after the boyfriend decided he wanted a kayak instead. A shop that had not been interested in ethics became briefly interested after a complaint landed with a weighty thump on a desk whose scars suggested it had seen lively paperwork before. We did not find everything. The 1893 S that had never been ours never became ours. It remained someone else's subjunctive. 3/4 stayed ghosts. 1 Morgan melted into a private collection that paid for quiet. But the heart of the collection beat again. The worst holes closed. The blue no longer looked like sky with missing stars. It looked like morning after rain. On the final Friday, we stood in Ms. Parker's office and presented our thick ledger of attempts, receipts, photographs, names, and notes. She read them like a novel you wish had been a little less exciting. Alvarez stood at the window and pretended to check the weather. When she had finished, she capped her pen and said, "Substantial recovery. Full asset liquidation of purchases used to fund the theft. Documented attempts on unrecovered items. Counseling attendance verified. Employment secured and maintained." Caleb had started work at a warehouse, night shift, where boxes move predictably and nobody asks the man to be charming. He liked the honesty of the schedule. He liked the way a paycheck arrives exactly when it says it will. He liked handing cash to Sloane and not calling it a surprise. He carried our inventory folded in his wallet because paper can be ballast. Miss Parker turned to me. "Victim satisfaction?" she asked. "I am satisfied in the way that keeps a man honest," I said. She smiled a little. "Deferred disposition. Complete your year without incident, and this file learns how to close quietly." Nobody clapped. There are victories that ask for silence because they are made entirely of consequences that finally learned manners. We celebrated at my kitchen table because that is where the story began being repaired. I made raised chicken and dumplings, and the house remembered how to smell like itself. After we ate, Caleb stood and asked to speak. He did not perform. He told the truth to 2 children who now measure the world with fractions and stories. He told them their grandmother called the police on him because she loves them more than she loves being comfortable. He told them a father can be wrong and still be a father. He gave each child a letter with the kind of sincerity that makes thick paper listen. Then he handed me a small box. Inside was a silver hairpin set with 2 wheat cents, 1946 and 1953, the years our mothers were born. Coins that weren't part of any set, he said. They wanted a job. I wore it. It made my white hair look less like surrender and more like a decision. In the morning, we took the collection to the bank. The safe deposit box room is the nicest vault for anxiety I've ever visited. Liam held a Morgan dollar and called it the moon. June held the 1916 D and whispered to it with the seriousness of a child who trusts metal more than she trusts her own future tense. We signed papers that named the trust stories made of silver. I wrote the beneficiaries carefully. I wrote the rules so clearly that even grief could read them. Under trustee, I added my name. Under co-trustee, I wrote Caleb's, and I watched the bank manager's pen hesitate for a heartbeat. With rules, I said. Of course, he answered, because people who touch other people's money professionally understand that rules are love wearing its best shoes. As a last act, I taped a note inside the old hall safe. For emergencies and grand adventures, Ray had written. I added, for lessons and maps. If you find this and you are a Crowley child, ask your father what a receipt can teach. Ask your grandmother why she made a phone call at 9:41 a.m. Ask Detective Alvarez why the phrase documented attempt makes him smile. Ask Ms. Parker how mercy stays strong without being loud. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, calling the police on my own son. The answer is simple. I regret that the situation required the call. I do not regret knowing exactly what kind of mother I am. Soft is not the opposite of strong. It is the shape strength takes when it is asked to hold a family together in a bright kitchen under a loud light. 2 months on the road taught us practical things: how to read pawnshop body language, how to keep coffee from tasting like surrender, how to cut lemons in gas station bathrooms when the cups smell like last week. It also taught us that revenge can be a straight back posture rather than a slammed door. I did not punish my son. I required him to learn. The difference matters. The collection is home now in the way that home means knowing where things are and why it matters that they are there. We did not rebuild time. We rebuilt a promise. Liam reads the note cards aloud: Luddy's Roses, Rusty's Discount, Z and the indoor hat, the kiosk with the fish. June draws a buffalo with a calendar taped to its side. Sloane writes a list of places where the cashier handed us something with kindness in her expression and says she is going to take cookies there at Christmas. Caleb coaches Liam's math team because counting is a language you can hand down. He tells the kids that the right answer is not magic, it is the last step in a series of respectful ones. He has stopped trying to buy good news. He makes it in quiet. And me? I am the woman who made the call and the woman who made the soup and the woman who keeps the key to a box where silver sleeps. Sometimes in the evening I sit on the porch with the inventory and trace the names with my finger as if they were rivers on a map. I tap my hairpin against the arm of the chair 3 times because Ray used to tap a penny before a deal and say, luck likes noise. Our luck now prefers paperwork and bedtime, but it likes a little sound. If you still want the sweet part, I let the dime talk first when we show the collection to friends. I lift the folder and point. I tell them about the judge, the Friday deadlines, the way a man named Z learned that privacy has to bow to proof, the way a dime can travel, learn humility, and come home under a polite court order. And then I tell them about the middle, the miles, the coffee, the quiet when we were finally done performing and ready to change. There is a photograph on the mantle now. Ray on the left with a grin that lived in the corners of his mouth. Me in the middle with the hairpin catching light. Caleb on the right with his hand on Liam's shoulder the way men put their hands on the future when they are trying to be careful. June at the front holding a buffalo nickel so it can hear our laughter. The coin looks like it understands urgency. We do too. What follows is the whole story, longer than you asked for, because some lessons need space. It begins where it began, with a door, a safe, a son, a phone call, and takes you with us through the dull miracles of getting whole. At 9:41 a.m. I dialed the police on my son and said my name very clearly so I would remember who I was. By 10 o'clock a detective was in my hall measuring the distance between decency and habit. By noon a prosecutor was teaching us how the law can be a classroom if everyone sits up straight. By 3 the plan was inked. By 5, the inventory was a first draft. If I tell it quickly, it sounds like competence. It felt like standing up slowly without knocking over a chair. The inventory woke me at 2 a.m. That night, I got out of bed and carried a folder to the kitchen where the fixed point in the room was the tape on the cover that said stories made of silver in Ray's hand. I opened to the wheat cents and ran my finger over the rows. I touched the empty, honest circle where the 1909 S should be and laughed softly at the audacity of a century. I touched the Mercury dimes and said each date like numbers in a prayer: 1916, D, welcome home, 1917, 1918, 1919. I touched the Morgan dollars and said 1893, S out loud, because saying the thing you want in an empty kitchen is a kind of training. Morning brought lists. I called every shop I knew and learned how to ask the right questions without announcing my son's shame to a stranger. Did you receive a 1916 D 3 weeks ago? I'd ask, calm as a calendar. In a slab? Some said no. Some said yes, and then said they were not in the habit of giving private information to private citizens, which is when I said the phrase that has opened more doors for me than a polite smile ever did. Detective Alvarez is working with us. People who work with metal respect a name and a number. I saw proof of that for 2 months straight. We drafted a budget that looked like a diet. Groceries without the fun aisle. Gas, receipts, coffee without names. I sold the watch because a woman should not let time sneer at her. Caleb listed the truck and surrendered his fondness for its shine without theatrics. This is not who I am, he started to say, and I stopped him. This is something you did, I said. You are also the person who can now do something else. We kept the grandchildren in the truth without loading them with the weight that belongs to adults. Your father used a shortcut that cost us a long walk, I told them. We are walking the long way together now. Liam asked how many miles. June asked if the long way had bathrooms. We laughed. We planned. By the end of week 1, we had recovered 2 Morgans, a 1932 D that had been standing in a glass case like a brave little boss, 3 Mercury dimes, a handful of quarters that made the folder look less like a mouth missing teeth, and a barber half that remembered the grease on Ray's thumb. We also had a stack of receipts that emphasized the difference between buying and buying back. I did not resent the prices. I was glad to pay the toll on the bridge we were lucky to have found. Week 2 gave us the forum thread where Z had posted. I printed the page and circled the sentence about the widow. I wanted to be angry at him for the hat and the posture and the way he spelled the word regret with a 0 in front, as if numbers bend for men with clever names. But anger is a resource that burns hot and fails early. I wanted him to give the coin back because the law asked him to, but more than that, I wanted him to learn the kind of embarrassment that repairs a man. He opened the door in bare feet and was surprised to see a mother on his porch with her son and a detective. He tried to have a conversation about fair market value. I tried to have a conversation about what the word fair had meant in my marriage. We won. The coin came home. That night we did not toast. We slept well. Week 3 introduced a shop with a couch that had seen too many stories. The owner smoked out back and came in with the kind of eyes that evaluate more than inventory. He admitted he had bought a roll of dimes and moved them out in pairs because inventory turnover comforted him. He liked to make the money move faster than his mind. It keeps me honest, he said, which told me what he was afraid of. He sold us 1 dime back at cost and wished us luck. People who have learned to ration mercy are generous with it when they find a story that deserves a larger serving. We started to laugh again at jokes that weren't jokes so much as shorthand. Rusties or Bustas? I'd ask, confusing the name with a billboard near the highway and then blushing. We laughed in line at a gas station where the man in front of us bought a single banana and a lottery ticket with the solemnity of a wedding vow. We laughed when the coffee was better than it had any responsibility to be. Humor returned the way spring returns in a town that did not ask for winter. Week 4 we spent time with the inventory the way you spend time with a patient. We annotated. We added arrows. We circled gaps as if our ink could encourage the right metal to return. Caleb folded a copy and kept it in his pocket. He pulled it out before he spoke to a clerk as if the paper were a permission slip for his better self. He stopped performing the role of the charming fixer. He started performing the role of the steady buyer with adequate funds and a straightforward ask. He also began, gently, to tell me things I had been pretending I did not need to hear. I bought the truck the week after the memorial because I thought a large object could absorb a large feeling, he said at a stoplight. I bought the watch because checking the time made me think about my father. I thought if I checked it often enough, I would prove to myself that he still occupied hours with me. Did it work? I asked. For a week, he said. Then the watch became a watch. I told him about the time during our 40th anniversary dinner when Ray slipped the 1932 D across the table to me and said, "This is how our children will remember I taught them to finish what they start." I told him about the fear I had that I would die before I could introduce the folders properly to the children, and how that fear made me selfish in a way that looks like generosity and acts like hoarding. By week 5, even the car seemed to cooperate. The heater decided to work at the exact moments we said something honest. The radio played songs we did not know the words to, which meant we had to listen to one another. We returned the dime. We ate pie. We slept. Week 6 is when our attempts started to outnumber our wins. This is the part people like to skip when they tell their road to redemption stories. The middle is repetitive. It is dull. It is daily. It is also where the change actually sticks. We made calls that led to nothing. We drove to a shop that had closed an hour earlier. We argued with a man who insisted he had never seen a 1934 Walker when his security camera footage told us he had bought one joyfully 7 days before. The footage got us nowhere. We added it to the ledger under documented attempt and moved on. I bought a notebook just for thank you notes. I wrote to pawnbrokers who treated us like a family, to clerks who took a breath before repeating a policy and then decided to make an exception they called something else, to people like Anders who gave us a coin and a sentence about men and birthdays and the price of good news. I wrote to the judge whose order made Z hand over metal with a sheepish grin. I wrote to the bank manager who let my grandchildren visit the safe deposit room because he remembered what it felt like to hold something that hums. In week 7, Sloane came along for a whole day. She asked, again, to understand what she hadn't seen. She sat with the money in her lap and looked relieved when her hands did not tremble. I thought being cheerful was an act of generosity, she said. Sometimes it's an act of avoidance. We can do both, I said. We can be cheerful and present. It just means we have to let the conversation include the hard parts, not pave over them with smiles. We turned it into a game with the children. 3 truths, 1 plan. Every night at dinner, each person offered 3 true sentences about their day and 1 plan for tomorrow. The plan had to be modest and must include the words I will. It calmed the house. It taught us that intention loves company. Week 8 brought us back to Delaney Gold and Loan, not because we needed to but because I had decided to deliver a box of donuts with a note that said thank you for assisting with lawful recovery. The clerk looked like he wanted to dislike me and couldn't. He pointed at the box. My manager doesn't like sugar, he said. It can sit on the counter and look pretty then, I said. That's all some things are for. I went back to the car and did not look back. There is dignity in leaving a scene without waiting for applause. We found nothing new in week 8 except patience. We wrote down the word, found nothing next to 3 addresses, and felt the accomplishment of specific disappointment. We learned that writing it down hurt less than pretending the day had not happened. Week 9, we chased rumors. A man at a grocery store kiosk told us a collector named Meyer liked to visit pawnshops late on Thursdays with cash and compliments. We waited at a likely shop and met Meyer. He turned out to be a gentle man with a large laugh and a habit of unbuttoning his cuff when nervous. He had one of our quarters. He had bought it from the soft sweater man for more than we were willing to pay. He sold it to us for what he paid because he had a mother who had once made a phone call that saved him. I wrote to his mother, too, care of the address on the back of the check he used to deposit the money I gave him. I told her son had restored something besides a coin. In week 10, the state map looked smaller. We crossed a county line and did not feel like travelers. We felt like inspectors in a reality where the exam involved kindness and consistency. Alvarez called to tell us he was proud of the shape our attempts made on paper. He brought over a print of the amplified whirl on the 1932 DS slab from Ray's hand and said, "This won't win any court cases, but it might win bedtime." I taped it inside the safe. We also practiced for the end. We called Ms. Parker on a Thursday with a detailed summary so Friday could be short. We started moving coins to the bank box at the end of each week so they would not resurface as temptation or trophies. We made space in the closet safe for paperwork and kept it neat. The neatness was not a compulsion. It was a ceremony. The last week finally arrived like a day you know your bones had been expecting. We cleaned the kitchen. We ironed our clothes, which we never do. We drove to the final shop on the list and came out empty-handed and strangely victorious. We had documented the attempt. We had written the names. We had obeyed the rules of a redemption story that does not ask for fireworks. When we sat with Ms. Parker and Alvarez and the file, there was nothing left to do but let the law be gracious without being naive. She spoke her careful words. We spoke ours. Then we went home and ate dumplings, and if that is not the happiest ending a family can earn, I do not know one better. You want a shocking beginning, and here it is again, simpler. I dialed the police on my own son, and kept dialing every week until he answered not with promises, but with proof. He sold every flashy thing he had bought to pretend he did not hurt. He drove across the state with me for 2 months, hand on the wheel, pride in the glove compartment, shame in the rear view, until every coin that could come home clicked into place. He chose me and the map over a cell and silence. He chose the slow miracle. Now the safe deposit key warms my palm like a small sun. The hairpin holds. The children count. The house knows the difference between quiet and secrets. The Whitman blue looks like sky again. When Liam and June are grown, they will open the folders and read the story cards. They will read Letty's Roses and Z and the indoor hat and the kiosk with the fish. They will learn that their great-grandfather believed stories should be heavy enough to feel, and that their grandmother believes love without boundaries is a river that steals houses. They will learn that their father once tried to borrow from history and had to pay it back with miles. And if any of them ever asks why we keep coins at all, I will tell them the truth I learned after 69 years and one decisive phone call. Some things are worth more than what they cost because of what they teach when they almost disappear.
So another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here you will have when more such stories.